So here's the thing you need to know about how cults begin and how they play out and how they eventually fizzle out. Every cult has at its head a person we call the Buddha. But it's not just someone who comes to class and just talks. They have something and we don't really know what they have. And not everyone can see what they have. There's a good chance that out of maybe 100 people, maybe 10 are attracted to the sort of charisma, the sort of magnetism that those particular folks have. And so those who are not attracted will eventually visit those who are attracted and ask them, why are you guys attracted to his or her philosophy of life? And the truth is they can't convince them, they can't describe, define, but they're attracted nevertheless. So that's the first thing about cults. It is initiated or created by someone with a mysterious element that lives inside them. Not everyone, but some people become attracted to that particular mystery, become selected. The people who find themselves attracted, they make up this thing called Sangha, or a community. 5, 10, 15 people who enjoy what they see, who enjoy what they hear. And there's a reason for that. I don't know you, but like many of us in this class, you have a set of stories inside you. And you don't share those stories with just anyone. There's a good chance you don't even know those stories full well yourself. All you know is that those stories have created inside you a good amount of emotions. Sometimes you wake up in a bad mood, some days you wake up in a pissy mood. Some days you just walk around angry because the stories are unresolved. And just in case you find yourself intimate with another human being, emotionally, you try to explain who and what you are on the inside, and you realize that you don't have the language for it. And so you remain alienated. You remain strange, not only from the world that lives inside you, but also from interacting with another human being. So you live in a very, very, very lonely world. Then something magical happens. EJ gives you a book, and you look at the book, and the title sounds interesting, so you open to the first chapter, and you read some paragraphs, and you realize ink on paper has the power to speak about your emotions. Emotions you've been wanting to describe for the longest time in your life, but you've never been able to, because you were in that particular realm uneducated. But all of a sudden, this book gives language to all the things you felt most of your life. And so what you do is you read the book cover to cover, and you begin to fall in love with the author. So you go to Amazon, and you buy every book that author has written. Let's call him Rollo May, the guy who wrote this book, A Cry for Myth. So one of the things you need to understand about cults is the following. The person who is the leader, the CEO of this organization, finds himself or herself a group of people who yearn, who hunger for something. Some are counterfeit, and some are true. Some people simply like to join something, and some people, it's not so much liking to join, they are really longing, yearning, questing after something they can't really describe. But the moment this person opens his or her mouth, all of a sudden they realize that the way he or she speaks lives their emotions. And sometimes they may have nothing on the inside, except, I suppose, some fantasies that have remained dormant, unrealized, and that person has the power to just wake him up. Sangha, community. Not for everyone, just a few people. The cult leader also has another element. It's called Dharma, teachings. And those teachings are only really heard by the community. In that community of maybe 20, only 5 maybe understand. Of the 5 that understands, only 1 can apply. So even in a cult of 20, 30, 100, 1,000 people, only a handful understand, and only one or two can actually apply. If that's a little too esoteric, too complex, I'll give it to you in a different way. You and your mom have been going at it for, say, 5, 10, 15, 20 years. And the only thing you've given her is frustration. Your mom comes to realize that she can't reach you. And every time she asks you a question, you just turn away and walk the other way. At a certain point, she comes in and she says, you have an appointment today. You say, with who? And remember, we don't really know what's going on with you. She doesn't know what's going on with you. But she's paralyzed. She doesn't know what to do. So she gets an appointment with a therapist. You walk into the room and you look at the therapist. And something about you wakes up, and that's your intuition, your senses, your feelings. You can immediately gravitate towards a therapist, you feel comfortable, or you just say, yuck. That's a mystery I can't describe. People just have spidey senses. You know, you gravitate towards someone because for some unknown reason, you don't like them for some unknown reason. Now, the moment you walk in and you have a certain feeling, that feeling gets tested by the interaction. This particular therapist either will work for you or not work for you. Should it work for you? It means a couple of things. First, you just feel at ease, you feel comfortable. And it hasn't gotten really serious at all, but you just feel comfortable. Then he or she asks you a few questions, and then you pay attention to see what their body language is like, how they're listening to you, the sort of questions they're asking, if they're pushy, if they're aggressive. And you realize that you're getting to be a bit more comfortable. And this goes on for a few weeks. And now you're really comfortable. And in fact, when your mom asks you, how was your session? You keep talking about it endlessly. You know what has happened? You have a cult leader now. You have a therapist on whom you depend for wisdom, for comfort, for solace. And so after 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 weeks, kind of like Matt Damon in the movie Good Will Hunting. At a certain point, the therapist looks at you and you break down. And this is after like some time. And all the stuff that lives inside you now comes out and you don't know what the hell is happening to you. But your therapist, having spent some time with you, knows your inner life a little bit, begins to put your emotions into language. And for the first time, Madison, who has been a bundle of confused emotions, now has words. And then your therapist says, when you go home, do A, B, C, D. Just in case a negative emotion comes up, do E, F, G, H. But those are the set of teachings that you have to follow. You're not a student. You just enrolled in a class. You don't write essays because you're interested in the subject matter. You're here for a grade. It takes a long, long time for people to become students. And having said that, let me tell you a story. So there is EJ and there is Matthew. EJ calls Matthew and says, there's a party. You know, let's go to this party. I'll pick you up tomorrow. And Matthew says, fine, let's do it. So he walks to his house and they're walking towards this space where this party is. As they're walking, they hear someone screaming. EJ doesn't care for people screaming, but for some strange reason, it fancies Matthew. Matthew says, let's go see what the hell is going on in this house. The door happens to be slightly cracked. He puts his head in, and there is Louis. And he is screaming, ranting, and being very, very animated. And for some strange reason, Matthew enjoys what he's hearing, and he doesn't know why. EJ keeps harassing him. Let's go. It's getting late. You know, hashish, cocaine, LSD, LCD, all those things. And Matthew says, yeah, just 5 minutes, 5 more minutes. Now, EJ is getting frustrated because, other people are finishing up all the drugs and drinking all the alcohol. So EJ continues his harassment, and Matthew keeps telling him, just wait, another 5 minutes, 5 minutes. At a certain point, Matthew looks at EJ and says to him, you go, I'll follow in about 10, 15, 20, 30 minutes. I'll come over there and meet you. Now, what's interesting about this is that you have two very, very good friends. They've been friends ever since they were kids. They're now in their 20s or 30s, right? And they both seek pleasure at this party. And they're walking. And this door is cracked. And remember what friendship is. It means that a good amount of who you are relates to a good amount of who the other person is. You guys have a lot of things in common. Now, the first question that you should ask is, why is it that two people who have been so close for the past 20 years, one would find pleasure in listening to Socrates, i.e. Louis, and the other doesn't? It doesn't make any sense. Why is it that Matthew listens to a stranger and is attracted, and EJ, who happens to be his best friend, listens, doesn't find an ounce of interest in what he hears? And that's the first mystery that you need to think about. Why are people interested in things? How does it happen? When does it happen? To whom does it happen? And the truth is, we don't know. Now, listening to Louis is difficult because he's like a Socrates. He doesn't ask simple things. He doesn't talk about superficial things. And that should be another thing you should think about. Socrates creates pain, and for some strange reason, Matthew enjoys it. The examined life, that's not fun. What does it mean to be black? What does it mean to be American? What does it mean to be a student? What does it mean to be in love? What does it mean to be young? What does it mean to be stupid? What does it mean to be intelligent? These are questions that have no real answers. And yet Matthew likes it. And the second thing or third thing you need to consider is the following. All of a sudden, the definition of pleasure begins to change. For EJ, drugs, smoking, sexing, that is how he defines pleasure. All of a sudden, for Matthew, everything has changed. He likes drugs and alcohol, but for some strange reason, he finds Socrates a bit more enjoyable. 10 minutes pass by, 20 minutes, 30 minutes, 40 minutes. EJ here keeps texting him. The hell are you, man? I'll be there. Don't worry, I'll be there. Look at Louis. He's got a big mouth. He keeps talking and talking and talking. He's got this infinite amount of energy to him. And there is Matthew standing by the door listening to Louis for the next 7, 8, 9, 10 hours. 10 hours! And do you know why Socrates can talk for 10 straight hours? It's called eudaimonia. He's possessed by the demon of happiness. For some strange reason, Matthew likes it. So when the talk is over, but Matthew goes to Louis and says, amazing, amazing. And I see all these people sitting and listening to you. Is there a way I can be your student? And Louis looks at Matthew and says, of course. Your first task is to clean the toilets. Toilets? I want to be inspired. I want to grow wings and fly to the sun, and you want me to clean the toilets? Well, if you want to be a student, you got to clean the toilets. Now, whenever you want to give your time, your energy, your life to another human being, you got to make sacrifices. You being in this class, you got to make a sacrifice. You can be in bed, you can be in this class, but you're not here in this class because you like me. You like the grade, because it gets you closer to a 4-year school. Matthew says, I came to learn philosophy, and this guy wants me to clean the toilet bowls. That doesn't make any sense. See, the problem with Matthew is that he assumes that he is ready to receive philosophy just because he's interested. But Louis knows that interest doesn't do anything. You could be interested in another human being, but that doesn't mean that you have the capacity to be in a committed relationship. What it just means is, kind of like most of the people in this room, you have the ability to ask questions, but it doesn't mean you understand your own question. And just in case you do understand your question, it doesn't mean you have the capacity to understand the answer. You just know how to ask questions without really understanding what you're asking. Socrates is looking not for someone who can so easily be inspired, but whether or not they can be in a committed relationship. Do you like Socrates enough to clean toilet bowls for a while? If the answer is no, well, you can't be Socrates' students. And that's another thing you need to understand. The better the teacher, the more the demands, the more difficult the demands. If you go out with an 18-year-old, they're not going to ask very much of you. They're 18. They're a punk. If you go out with a 40-year-old, it's a different story. Matthew looks at Socrates and says, okay, I'll clean the toilet bowls. So for the next 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 months, that's what Matthew does. He gets up at 6, goes to the basement, cleans the toilet bowls, comes up for 10 minutes, listens to Louis, gets a bit more inspired, and goes back and cleans more toilet bowls. After 6, 7, 8 months, Matthew goes to Socrates or Louis and says, is it time for me to be in the lecture hall to listen to you? Not yet. It's time for you to wash the dishes in the kitchen. I'm here for philosophy, man. I'm not here to be your slave or to be a servant. I want to do philosophy. No, wash the dishes. Another 6 months washing the dishes. Another 6 months cleaning the floors. Another 6 months cooking. Another 6 months serving what you've cooked to the people at the gathering. And then eventually he's permitted to sit in the main hall, but he sits way, way, way in the back. Socrates talks, but Matthew is way in the back. He can't even hear what Socrates is saying, but he sits nevertheless. And that's called commitment. That's called devotion. At a certain point, Socrates looks at him and says, now you can sit in the middle. He can hear, 5 out of the 10 words spoken by Socrates. Then he is invited to sit at the very front. Do you know why? He has ears now. Those ears can hear. And then at a certain point, Socrates looks at him and says, who are you? I don't know who you are. You don't know who I am. I've been your slave for the past 5 years. What do you mean you don't know who I am? I have no idea who you are. And he kicks him out of the lecture hall. Do you know what happens when you spend your entire life serving another human being and the end result is you getting kicked out for no good reason? That's the ultimate betrayal. You feel that Socrates has betrayed you, and you try to talk to his people, no one knows who you are. You talk to city people, no one knows who they are. You are. So you know what Matthew does? He goes to the cemetery on Piedmont. If the living can't understand me, maybe the dead will. And there he just weeps like an infant. And out of exhaustion, he just passes out. And then he has a dream. And he wakes up and he's enlightened. The point I'm trying to make is that's how students are made.